What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 13. Sleepers and studs.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon.
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to give you a sleeper pick and my favorite stud at each position.
And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay, guys, NFL Week 13. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So my quarterback stud is Joe Burrow from the Cincinnati Bengals, playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the 9th worst defense overall. They give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Joe Burrow has averaged 24.2 fantasy points per game on the season. He gets an average of 4.4 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 8% owned, projected at 21.3 fantasy points here in Week 13. But I'm going to bump that up to 25 fantasy points. I think he scores over his season average, and he's 6,900 DraftKings salary, 1,400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Bengals trailing by 2. So Joe Burrow has scored 18, 32, and 19 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He got 9, 4, and 4 rush attempts in those games. So there's a lot to like about this pick. Vegas thinks it's going to be a high-scoring game, a close, competitive game. Joe Burrow, a pretty decent amount of rushing upside, and fantastic matchup. It's a home game, so I like Joe Burrow here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, so my sleeper pick at the quarterback position is Mike White from the New York Jets, playing the Minnesota Vikings, who have the 2nd worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Mike White scored 28 fantasy points in his first game of the season. He had 3 rush attempts last game. He's going to be about 5% owned. Now, only projected at 15 fantasy points here in Week 13. It was only 1 game. He's not proven, but he does have a fantastic matchup. I'm going to bump this up to 17 fantasy points. I think he can keep the momentum rolling here. He's 5,400 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Jets trailing by 3. So I like Mike White here versus the Minnesota Vikings. Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So my running back stud is Derrick Henry from the Tennessee Titans, playing the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Derrick Henry has averaged 21.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 22.5 rush attempts per game and 2.4 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 14% owned, projected at 17.7 fantasy points here in Week 13. He's 8,100 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Titans trailing by 4.5. Derrick Henry has scored 15, 25, and 9 fantasy points in the last 3 games, up of 17, 28, and 19 rush attempts, on top of 3, 2, and 3 pass targets. So I like Derrick Henry here versus the Philadelphia Eagles.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
All you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, my sleeper pick at the running back position is Cordell Patterson from the Atlanta Falcons, playing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have the 5th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Cordell Patterson has averaged 13.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.1 rush attempts per game, 2 pass targets per game, been on the field for 69% of the snaps, only going to be about 2% owned, projected at 11.1 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $5,800 DraftKings salary, $600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42 points scored in this game, with the Falcons trailing by 1. Cordell Patterson has scored 10, 13, and 3 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 11, 10, and 5 rush attempts, on top of 5, 2, and 1 pass targets. Now, Cordell Patterson was out for a little while. He came back and he really only has 2 full games under his belt after coming back from injury. So this will be his 3rd game back where he's full strength. I think we're going to see more volume and more involvement by Cordell Patterson. I think now he is 100%, and he's an explosive player, and he can get involved in the passing game. He got 5 pass targets last game, so he does have that receiving upside. Even though they haven't used him out of the backfield as much throughout the season, it is encouraging that he got 16 touches last week. And if he can get 15 plus touches in this game, I think he has a good chance at hitting value. So I like Cordell Patterson here versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. So my wide receiver stud is Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions, playing the Jacksonville Jaguars, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Amon-Ra St. Brown has averaged 17.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 74% of the snaps, going to be about 20% owned, projected at 17.6 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $7,100 DraftKings salary, $900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51 points scored in this game, with the Lions trailing by 1. Amon-Ra St. Brown has scored 31, 15, and 25 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 10, 8, and 11 pass targets, on top of 1, 1, and 1 rush attempt. So he got 1 rush attempt per game for the last 3 games. That helps a little bit, adds to some rushing upside, and it's a good matchup here in what should be a high-scoring game and a close competitive game. And he's been a target monster the last 3 weeks and really throughout the season. So I like Amon-Ra St. Brown here versus the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
Okay, my sleeper pick at the wide receiver position is George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers, playing the Atlanta Falcons, who have the 6th worst defense overall. They give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. George Pickens has averaged 10.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.4 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 79% of the snaps, only going to be about 4% owned, projected at 12.1 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $5,100 DraftKings salary, $1,600 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 42 points scored in this game, with the Steelers favored by 1. George Pickens has scored 11, 18, and 15 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 6, 6, and 4 pass targets. So this is one of my favorite sleeper picks. He's got a great matchup. He's been emerging as a pretty good wide receiver. Pretty decent volume the past 2 games, 12 targets in 2 games. Consistent production the past 3 weeks. Nice season average, double digits. Low ownership. He's on the field for almost 80% of the snaps. And his salary is right. So I like George Pickens here versus the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. The tight end stud on the slate is Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs, playing the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing tight ends, and Travis Kelce has averaged 22.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.3 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 80% of the snaps, going to be about 11% owned, projected at 19.7 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $7,900 DraftKings salary, $500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 53 points scored in this game, with the Chiefs favored by 2. Travis Kelce has scored 16, 39, and 20 fantasy points in the last 3 games, off of 8, 10, and 7 pass targets. So I like Travis Kelce here versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Okay, my sleeper pick at the tight end position is Gerald Everett from the LA Chargers, playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have the 3rd worst defense overall. They give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Gerald Everett has averaged 9 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.9 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 3% owned, projected at 9.1 fantasy points here in week 13. He's $4,400 DraftKings salary, $1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Chargers trailing by 1. Gerald Everett scored 8 fantasy points off of 4 pass targets last game. It's a great matchup in a high-scoring game. Should be a close, competitive game. So I like Gerald Everett here versus the Las Vegas Raiders.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smickety smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NFL slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.